Now, in the studio, we've been joined by Commissioner General of the National Revenue Authority, NRA, Jennifer Bangura. Now, the Commissioner General is here to talk about NRA's plans to shaping the path forward to enhanced revenue, advanced tax reforms and policy implementations for fairer and more effective tax systems, how the authority is moving beyond short-term revenue growth to introducing reforms that promote fairness and improved compliance, key efforts made to advocate for fairer tax policies within and outside Sierra Leone, which would enhance the country's domestic revenue, among other things. Good morning, Commissioner. It's a pleasure having you.
Good morning. Glad to be here this morning.
Is this your first time coming to?
Second time.
It's your second?
Yeah, I was here sometime last year.
Are you as impressed as your first?
Always.
All right. So there are a lot of issues actually around tax, taxing, tax inflation. Quite recently we saw a group of people who actually marched to the secretarial building there at U building, complaining that, the taxes have been hiked by 100% or more. Should we be concerned?
So once again, it's a pleasure to be here. As I said, I was here last year, and I became the Commissioner General in December of 2023.
23 years.
23, but prior to that, I was at the Ministry of Finance as the Deputy Minister of Finance 1, and then prior to that, I was the Deputy Commissioner General at the National Revenue Authority for about 5 to 6 years.
You're more or less a financial expert.
Well, I'm trying. I'm in between. I'm trying.
Okay.
So before I answer that question, I just want to take your viewers back to what we did in 2024 and how we did it, and then we can move forward. 2024 was an excellent year, especially when I returned to the National Revenue Authority. There was a lot of turbulence because the previous CG, I think, served for about 4 months. So I was like in and out of the Ministry of Finance. So when I came back, it was really turbulent, when it comes to relationship with taxpayers, when it comes to relationship internally with staff, with international, development partners. So I had to come in and ensure that all of that turbulence was settled. And then also there were a lot of reforms, policy reforms that were passed in the previous year through the Finance Act 2023 that were not implemented. So I came in also implementing that. So trying to settle things down, implement the reforms that were not, and then ensure that we ended the year, very effectively. That in 2024, we ended the year with about 99.1% on target, of which December was the best year, the best month, sorry, where we brought in about 10% more than the target. Now, there was a lot of activities, lots of activities going on in 2024, but we ended, on a very high note. And then we started in 2025. 2025 is a very special year. I mean, we just ended the first quarter. And the great thing about 2025 is the fact that with the new Finance Act, there are no new taxes. So I just want to make it very clear to your listeners that in 2025, there are no new taxes, albeit the fact that the incident that you referred to, where importers at the key, which we'll get to later, we're up in arms that there are new taxes or the increase in taxes. There are no new taxes in the new Finance Act. What we have in the new Finance Act is compliance improvement and other punitive measures for either not filing on time or not paying on time. But there are no new taxes. Even if your viewers can remember, in 2024, there was a reinstallation of import duty on rice, which according to the law, it was 5% in 2024, and it should have been an additional 5% to bring it up to 10% in 2025. But the government and the Minister of Finance have seen it right that we stay that implementation until maybe 2026. So coming to the question that you asked about the women who were at the EU building, at the port, at customs, we have about 20 to 21 port operators. But of course, customs is in the middle of it, because everything that happens there, it is customs. Containers are delayed, it's customs. Something happens, it is custom. So the process in clearing, we have a private company, ITS, that does the valuation based on the invoices and other documents that are presented to them. They are independent of customs. So they do the valuation and they provide a document called a CVC. Now that CVC actually indicates the taxes that an importer is supposed to pay. We at customs, what we do is either we go by what it's on that document, or we can opt to uplift. What does uplift means? We open the container and do 100% examination. The private company does not do examination. They have a scanner. They scan the containers and then they also assess based on what is on the invoice. So when that CVC comes to us, we can judge. I mean, we are the expert. We can say, no, what you have on your invoice does not commensurate. So we think we need to pay more. So what do? We will uplift and we do 100%. So what has been happening during COVID, there was this program that the government implemented to bring reprieve and to make things easier on importers because things were very expensive. So that policy stayed. So what happened was, in January, we decided that the policy that was implemented about 2 years ago will be reversed, which means that the CVC that comes from the company, the private company, is what we would use. Now, what has been happening in the past, the last 2 years, has been this bad habit. The CVC that originates from ITS gets doctored and people play with it. And by the time it gets to us, the figures change. So what we have decided to do is the original CVC that comes from the private company is what we will use. And then what we have started doing is we've started integrating our system. Because right now, because there's no integration, things happen along that processing path. So we have started integrating, and currently what we have is we have a window to their system. So when you bring that CVC, we'll be able to verify and confirm if it is real. So what has been happening is all the noise that was going on that NRA don't increase, this don't happen, it did not happen that way. All we did was we took that bad practice that has been happening the last 2 years, and then we did the policy reversal of what was implemented during the COVID period.
Has this been communicated to them?
Yes, even before we implemented it, it was communicated. But of course, when things happen, they won't tell the public that they have communicated with us. But what we have done, though, to make sure that we continue the good relationship, because we as tax collectors, we should have good relationship with everyone. So we have been meeting with them. The Chamber of Commerce actually called some of us to the table. The NRA was there, the Importers Association was there, the clearing and forwarding agents who are really in the middle of all of this. We're all at the table and we are having a conversation, and that conversation will continue, and that conversation will be broadened to bring in other operators that work at that space.
We all know that, of course, taxation is actually the backbone of the country's,
Exactly.
revenue and the likes, because money is gotten from that would go towards essential services, which the government will use, for its citizens. I want to take you to a recent report by Budget Advocacy Network, BAN, and you could talk a bit about tax exemptions as well. The report actually highlights a sharp rise in tax exemptions that are granted to industry sector, particularly, I think it was the mining sector, which last Friday, the guest we had talked about, with foregone revenue increasing from 39% of domestic revenue in 2018 to 60% in 2023. Now, with these figures, how do you justify these exemptions when it comes to terms of economic benefits versus maybe revenue loss?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to read the report. I actually brought an excerpt of the report. I was part of the luncheon at the Ministry of Finance, and BAN, in support of Christian Aid, did an excellent job. And I am glad that the public is aware of this, and I think the scope of their report is from 2018 till 2023, I believe. In the report, it is emphasized, and during the luncheon, we emphasized that tax exemption is not a bad practice. Tax exemptions are part of government policies to encourage investment. to encourage good investment in all sectors. What is not acceptable is the abuse of the exemption. And what this report clearly showed is the fact that, as you mentioned, majority of the exemption is for the mining companies. And the intention of extending these exemption is to ensure that our potential investors come, they are able to develop themselves or build their business in the shortest time. Government will give you 2 years, 5 years to make sure that you establish yourself well. Once you establish, so you can pay taxes. That is the intent. But what this report clearly showed that intent is not happening the way it's supposed to be happening. So I am glad that they were able to identify recommendations, which we are very welcoming to. The Ministry of Finance, the Deputy Minister of Finance too, joined me during that luncheon. And I am glad that it has been laid out there. And even before the report came, we at the NRA have been ringing that bell.
So you agree that there is an abuse when it comes to tax exemptions?
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, the abuse of the implementation. I mean, if, for example, when a tax exemption is granted for you to build a factory, you're only supposed to bring in the materials, the equipments that help build that factory. Don't bring in personal stuff. Don't bring things to build your own house. That's an abuse. So what the recommendation here is saying, amongst other things, is the monitoring, of those that have tax exemption. Now, we have the businesses that have tax exemption, and then we have relief agencies, like our international partners, which is a different type of tax exemptions that they get because that's by law, the Geneva Convention. But this report is focusing on businesses, whether it's the mining, agriculture, energy. So it's not only the mining companies, we have other sectors as well. But the abuse, I'm glad that the report was able to really clearly lay it out. Who is getting it? What has been happening? The revenue loss that has been attributed to these abuse, not because the exemptions were granted, but because the exemptions were abused by whomever had it. So I'm glad that the report is out, and just rest assured that Ministry of Finance and NRA will work hand in hand to ensure that we implement those recommendations that they have highlighted.
And another recommendation was to actually, put in the public those who would be receiving these tax exemptions.
Exactly.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, if you're receiving exemptions, because a lot of times companies come and they flourish without really giving credit to what the government is doing. So most of the times, these exemptions are considered to be government counterpart funding. So someone will come, a private investor will come and say, I want to do this, and this is how much it's going to cost. And then the government will say, well, I don't have the liquid cash to give you right now, but the exemptions that I will give, which will be considered, part of the government counterpart funding. So government has a stake, quote unquote, in the businesses, private business, because we're giving exemptions. And it is tax forgone today, with the hope that once the business is up and running, we will get more taxes, or we'll recover the taxes forgone through exemptions.
Generally, how would you describe tax compliance within Sierra Leone?
Tax compliance in Sierra Leone, and like everywhere else, is challenging. And again, we have different categories of taxpayers. I'm quite sure you and I, we are very compliant because we don't have any choice. At the end of every month, when our salaries are paid, you don't have the choice. Your employer or my employer will deduct a PAY. So you and I are very compliant because we don't have a choice. But when it comes to businesses, it's a different story. You have the large taxpayers, and this is where you find your corporations, your big corporations. They have independent consultants that help them when it comes to tax compliance. So for them, it is not as challenging for us. The only effort that we are putting in for them is to make sure that they file on time, they pay on time, and then if there are any other activities after that, we support them because they have their consultants that help them. We have the middle taxpayers who do not have the resources the large taxpayers have to retain consultants to help them, to remind them. So what we do, there's a lot of education that goes into that to just make sure that, once again, file, pay on time. And then we have the micro and the small. which is where we find a lot of our women businesses. And the women that went to U-Building that day, what we did, we actually set them aside and we are working with them to ensure that the containers that were trapped during that policy rearrangement, we are helping them to go through the process. So tax compliance is slow. It is not where we want it to be. That's why in 2025, our focus is on making sure that we improve on tax compliance. Because we do not have increase, we do not have increase in taxes and or new taxes, compliance is in the center of how we are going to meet our taxes, or our target for 2024. It is very challenging depending on where you find yourself, which category you find yourself. But we are making sure that we have a robust taxpayer education, and we started the year by engaging the different stakeholders. We started with the banks in January, and then we extended that to our large taxpayers. We met with them, brought them up to speed as to what the laws are for 2025. We have also met with other stakeholders to just make sure that they're educated, they make sure that they are supported. And taxpayer education is a journey, is a continuous process. So to answer your question, taxpayer compliance is challenging, but we are putting the right measures in place to make sure that we increase those compliance measures and rates.
You'd also introduced the electronic cash register system, but compliance is a problem. A lot of these small and medium businesses do not use them.
Yeah.
How do you ensure compliance?
Yeah. So the electronic cash register actually deals with our GST collection of our GST taxes. Yeah. And in other countries, and especially on the continent, based on research, GST is one of the largest tax handles. But for us, it has been a struggle since we implemented that reform, I believe, in 2021. Yeah. At that time, we had about 5,000 GST registered taxpayers. And I'm quite sure that number has increased over time. So the current devices that we had, we are piloted. So we got about 5,000 devices in different categories. Because we have some taxpayers like the big supermarkets, they have the systems integrated. So when you go to the supermarket, when the receipt comes out, you will see that it has a NRA logo on it, but you don't get to see the calculators because it's integrated. And then we have other systems that we use. But for the ones that are not integrated, where you get to see the calculators, the education has been ongoing. We have talked and implemented different methods to just use as an incentive for taxpayers to remember, or businesses, consumers, you and I, to remember to always ask for your GST receipt. If you don't have ask for your GST receipt, the payments that you make do not go to NRA. And if you do not ask for your GST receipt, the taxes that you pay, because I've said this and we continue to say it time in and time out, that when you buy something, anything that you buy, GST is inclusive. So when you do not ask for your receipt, or if you do not force the taxpayer or the business to use the system, the money that you're paying does not get to the NRA. We are putting different systems in place. We're in communication with the Ministry of Finance to buy additional devices, because the devices that we have currently, as I said, are not enough. But we are putting different measures in place to just make sure that the businesses use the machine. And I'm appealing to you and to your viewers that every time you go out there, ask for your GST receipts. If they don't use the machine, the onus is on you as a citizen to ensure that you force them. I have people who will call me, I've come to this business, they're not using your machine. I will take their names and I will send someone out there. But it's a continuous process. The education will continue, and we have to invite every citizen, because tax collection is not only, as much as the National Revenue Authority has the mandate to collect, but the onus is on all of us as citizens to ensure that compliance, we be a part of the collection to ensure that the compliance level increases.
There are several reforms, within the NRA. one you've touched on before now, but essentially, how do you compel, someone to adhere to, these tax principles, like, for example, use of the machine, that you've just said. It is one thing for you to say, oh, you know what, please, can you give me my receipt? But again, what compels one, the businessman, or the businesswoman, if I should say, or the owner of the enterprise, to use the machine?
We have laws. The tax laws are very clear. We have regulations. There are fines. There are punitive measures. But again, it's just like when we go to church on Sundays or we go to mosque on Fridays. Every Sunday, the pastor will remind us about our contribution, tithes. So every day, every Sunday, or every Friday, that message is passed. We have the hard law. We have the law.
Okay. And
if there are penalties, and if you don't issue receipt, there's a penalty. But it appears that the incentive to get caught, because if you don't issue receipt, you make a lot of money. You get caught one time, it's about 20,000 leones. So they will take that risk, but there are laws, there are hard laws to ensure that they comply. And then there's also soft law. And what is a soft law? The education, ensuring that all of us are part of that education. Demand for your receipt, and if they don't give you the receipt, you report back to the National Revenue Authority. But we are using all measures to ensure that compliance level increases and that the system is used, because we are putting these systems. The reason why we are implementing these reforms is to make everybody's life easier. It will make the business person's life easier. It will make the taxpayer's life easier. It will even make compliance costs. Reduce compliance costs. So it's not only for us to raise revenue or to maximize or surpass our target, but to also make their lives easier. So it is important that we continue to send that message.
But Commissioner, I read the 2023 audit report, and there it reveals that National Revenue Authority failed to collect penalties totaling 3.6 billion. Leones, from defaulting taxpayers. It's all the same things we've been discussing.
Exactly. And what we have done is there's a process to collecting defaulters, collecting default payments. First, you send out a warning, because that's what the law says. Because again, taxation, there are laws that we have to follow. You send an invoice or send an assessment. They have X amount of time to pay or to file and to pay. If they don't pay, you send a warning. Send a warning once, you send a warning twice. If they don't adhere, I think during that time late last year, there was information out there that we were sealing businesses. Yeah. That is the final result. If we have sent messages, you don't hit, we will seal. And what does seal means? We'll close your business until such time. And of course, once that starts happening, people will take to the media. The NRA also has the power, this Commissioner General has the power. If you're a CEO of a company, we can prevent you from traveling. We can put words at the airport that you don't leave the country. But that is the last resort. We don't want to get to that, because it brings negative publicity, it brings inconvenience. So the law gives us the right to make sure that you are inconvenient to do your business. But every time we seal a business, what happens there is, you, the business person, you lose your revenue, and we, the tax collector, we also lose revenue. But we have all these measures that we put in place. So what you refer to in the audit report, what we did after that audit report came out, and even before the audit report came out, we have sent arrears letters to all of the defaulters, and the process has started from there.
Have they paid?
Some of them have paid, and some of them have provided documentation that they have paid. So most of the times when the auditors come, when these the data is collected, sometimes the payments are made subsequent after the data is collected. So we sent out the arrears in notice, and they are responding that some of them have paid, and we are yet to verify those payments.
What are some of the most common concerns you've received from businesses or individual taxpayers?
Concerns, the biggest concern is the complaint. We are automating our systems, and NRA is a microcosm of Sierra Leone, which means that if you have connectivity problem, the business person has connectivity problem. And if we are automating our systems, we need 24 hours electricity. We need uninterrupted connectivity because our systems, you log in from wherever you are. Okay. So that is one of the biggest concerns, not only from the business people, but from us as well. Because we are going from manual to completely automated. And if you're automating your system should be available 24 hours. We at the NRA, we have put measures in place. So if ETSA goes out, we have our backup generators. We have backup generators to make sure that our data center is working 24 hours. If the internet, primary internet service provider goes down, we have redundancies to make sure that it kicks in. All of that is very, very, very costly. But what we have done is to make sure that we always have our systems running to give the taxpayer access. There was a misinformation that was making rounds, I think late last year or earlier this year on social media, that NRA waits till the end of the month and then we'll switch off our systems. So they can file late and then they will get penalized. Why would we want to do that? It is a system that we work with, and we always tell them, don't wait last minute. If your taxes are due, you're supposed to file on the 30th. We encourage taxpayers, don't wait till the 30th, because there's this rush. You have thousands of people who are coming to access the system. And if the system cannot accommodate everyone.
And it happens with a lot of applications.
It happens.
When it reaches around the deadline.
But they were quick to jump to conclusion that it is a ploy for them to file late so we can charge them late fee. Far from that. So we encourage and educate taxpayers. Yes, it is your right to file on the deadline, but to be on the safe side. You can file and not pay. You can file today and you can pay by the deadline. And that brings me to this information, which is very important for our GST registered taxpayers. One of the policies, the policy change in the 2025 Finance Act is the filing and payment date for GST. Prior to 2025, they're required to file on the last day and pay on the last day. But we have changed that policy. We are now, the law says they file by, on or before the 21st of the following month when GST is due. But they have 9 days. So you file on the 21st and then you pay at the end of the month. So you have 9 days to review your records. You have 9 days for us to review our records as well. And then you pay on the last day. So you don't have to wait till the last day anymore. So we did that to ease off that stress and the pressure. But that's one of the biggest concerns, not only for the taxpayers, but also for us. But we are making sure that our systems are maintained to make it possible for them to have access to it when and as they need it.
How affordable or reachable is tax education for citizens?
Tax education, we have it in different types and different forms. The best, quickest way to get information on NRA is we have a website. We have actually launched a new website to make it more user-friendly and interactive. That's the best way if you want any documentation, policies, finance acts, anything about the NRA, you can find it on the website. We also have taxpayer education, and as I said, we tailor it based on the tax office. And what we have done, taxpayer engagement is very important. As I speak, starting this week, the team at the Domestic Tax Department has started engaging taxpayers and reminding them about a very important due date for this month. We have income tax, the 5th and final installment for payment on corporate income tax is due at the end of this month, the 30th of this month. So we have started engaging, we have started educating them, we have started talking to them. And if they need any support, they can reach out to our office. We have a teen office We used to have a fragmented system when it came to the registration for TIN. So in our effort in automating the system, the ITAS, which is responsible for the registration of the tax identification number, we have a TIN office. So not only do we go out to educate, we also invite taxpayers to come to our offices, especially the one on ECOWAS Street. If they have any questions, if they have difficulty with the TIN registration, they can come to us. So our taxpayer education is in different forms, designed for different tax office, depending on where you find yourself, including for customs. We're constantly engaging the clearing and forwarding agents. We regulate them. The NRA does the application. We issue the certificates, which gives them the authority to be an agent, and we are constantly engaging them. So our taxpayer education is not only tailored for the domestic tax department, but it's also done for customs and for our non-tax department. And at the non-tax department, I think that's where we get about between 15 to 20% of our revenue collected. But we do it in collaboration with about 28 MDAs. So whether you're going to register for your ID card, or you're getting a birth certificate, or you have purchased a land that you need to get a conveyance and all of that. So we work with these MDAs where they really, quote unquote, take the lead, because they are the ones that issue the order to pay, and the service user will go and pay, and then they will come to NRA, and then we'll issue a receipt. But that also is automated, whereby you can use your mobile app. In the past, you have to go to the bank. You go to the MDA, they'll give you an order to pay, you go to the bank, then you come to the NRA. So all of that has been automated. Once you get the order to pay, you can log on to your handheld device, and then you can process it. So taxpayer education is ongoing. Even I, appearing right now, talking to your audience, is part of our taxpayer education effort.
Are there any major reforms within the NRA?
Many since 2018. It's ongoing. Yet last year was a lot of reforms were implemented. Now if you notice, when you buy alcoholic beverages and even non-alcoholic beverages, you will see the stamp, that, or you can see the laser imprint on the water. That is the excise tax stamp that we implemented last year. And then we are also marking the fuel. There's been a lot of revenue losses, in the excise for fuel. So we started, and not only that, with the concession as well. We talked about the exemptions. Mm-hmm. So it's not only the physical, we also have the fuel that the mining companies get. Some are either fully exempted or partially exempted. And there is a lot of mishappenings there as well, where some mining companies will get the concession and then take the fuel and put it back into the market for profit. So they don't pay tax on it and they make profit. So they get to abuse of the exemption. So the fuel marking is actually marking the commercial, we are marking the retail, and then we are also marking the concession. And that is done to also discourage smuggling, and we have teams out there. We work in collaboration with PRA to do the monitoring. The company that we are working with provided a vehicle, a system that we every now and then go out there and then to monitor and test. So we can tell if the fields that we have marked have been mixed, or the field that we did not mark was mixed. And then we are working. We haven't started penalizing yet because it's a new reform. We are working with the retailers to educate them, and even the OMCs to educate them. But we have started the monitoring, and when there are findings, we educate them. But sooner or later, we'll start applying the law to make sure that we find them.
NRA's contribution has been quite significant to the Consolidated Fund.
Yes. The
last time Masudinji was here, and he told us how, well you've been performing, as an agency. But at a time when, even our mining companies are not giving much to the country through royalties, if you like, what particular indicators are you looking at? Are you going to improve, contributions to the consolidated? Do we have challenges that perhaps could prevent that?
Yeah.
It's a new year, actually. I'm sure you have benchmarks that you've already set.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you mentioned that the financial sector was here. Our revenue over the last 2 years, from 2022 to the end of 2024, more than doubled in collection. Where in 2022, I think the actual that we collected was about 7.1 billion. And by the end of 2024, it's about 14.560 billion. So it's more than doubled, over the last 2 years. And in 2025, our target for this year is about 18.9 billion, which is about 31% more than what we did the previous year. So clearly, you see a steady increase, a significant increase, and continues to increase. And that is done. The increases are due to the fact that we are automating our systems. Automation of systems reduces a lot of leakages, and most importantly, it removes that middle person. Because when we are operating in a heavily automated system, a lot happens. So the projection, the significant and steady increase of revenue projection is as a result of the reforms that we are putting in place. And we are of the strong conviction that as these reforms become sustainable, tax collection will be easier and will even bring in more. It is very much clear that even the target that we are setting, we can do more. We can definitely do more. And what we have done at the start of this year in response to the sluggish start of the year is we have identified about 21 revenue measures, both from within and from without. And we have started working to implement them. And we believe that in the short run, we'll be able to make up, because we ended the quarter not to our expectation. March was very impressive, but because January and February started slow, it spilled into the quarter ending slow. But it is our conviction, and we are going to put in extra effort to make sure that we recover not only the first quarter, but then end the first half of the year strong. Because as your viewers are aware, we are in the IMF program. And last year we did extremely well. And we were able to gain approval for that program. But in order for us to stay in the program, revenue is key, expenditures are key as well. So we are working on both sides to just make sure that we make that possible. But you're very right, revenue has been increasing, and then it's based on the fact that the reforms are holding and we have to make them sustainable. Just
lastly, before you go, for me, aside from fragile connectivity, which perhaps has been hampering your work, which are the factors would you point to as being major stumble blocks to your work?
Well, when it comes to revenue mobilization, the mandate that we have lots of players. We have many players in that space. We are working with taxpayers. You're working with Parliament. You're working with the Ministry of Finance. You're working with other MDs. A lot of stakeholders in that space. I wouldn't call it a challenge. I would call it an opportunity in the making. Whereby bringing all stakeholders, like for example at the ports, it will bring a lot of relief and more revenue to the country if all of the players at the port work in unison. Because at the end of the day, if we work in unison, it's good for the importer. If the importer's container comes, and before the container comes, he or she has all the documents that he or she needs from the shipping agency, from all the other companies that are there, it takes 5 days. As per the law, it should not take more than 5 days to clear a container. But because of the complexities that exist at the port, it's longer. When we come to the domestic tax department, the taxpayers need to be educated, make sure that they file on time. But first of all, we identify them, because in order for the taxpayer to file on time, first you need to identify them and make sure that they register. And we are going through a process right now where we are trying to expand the tax base. So for me, I won't call it a challenge. I will call it an opportunity in the making to make sure that everybody supports. And taxpayer education is each and every one of us our responsibility as citizens. Because as you mentioned in your opening, it is the revenue that we collect that the government uses to provide the services that each and every one of us need, be it for the good roads, be it for the medical hospitals, be it for education for our kids. So the onus is on us. So we're all tax collectors when it comes to really making sure that we bring in the requisite amount of money that the government needs.
Are you hopeful the tax base will expand?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're really trying to tap into the small, micro and small, and that's where we have a lot of women, and it is our hope that we will expand into that space.
Okay.
All right. Jennifer Bangura, Commissioner General, National Revenue Authority. It was a pleasure speaking with you this morning. We hope to be seeing you often, if you can.
Yes. yes. We'll try to set a time. If it's quarterly, why not?
Right.
So I'll come and talk about how we did. I'll come after the second half, maybe in July sometime.
Right.
To
Look
come
forward
and
to
discuss
seeing you.
everything. Thank you very much for having me.
Indeed.